Hi, this is Jim Putman from Real Life Ministries, and we're in the Journey podcast number 2. And I want to share with you something that we embedded in the Journey workbook that is important to us. We put in there what we call the Disciple Makers Covenant. Here's why we did that. First, I think most Christians think it's their job to invite somebody to church at the most. More mature believers will go, yeah, I'm going to invite people to church and I'm going to be a part of the church, but I'm also going to invite somebody to accept Christ. I'm not going to expect the pastor to do it. I'm going to ask them. I'm going to pray with them. I'm going to baptize them, and that's really good. But oftentimes, they forget that just as Jesus invited people into relationship, for those who has accepted him, he said, come and be in relationship with me, I'm going to disciple you. When Jesus said, go make disciples, he didn't mean just invite them to be baptized or invite them to the church, but learn to be a disciple maker and go and disciple others in the same way I discipled you. And so most people don't understand that when you share Christ with somebody, your goal then is to move them from, I've shared my life and Christ with you, now I want to connect with you, so that we can go through this process of connecting one to another, connecting you to the church, connecting you to truth, connecting you to other believers, so that as time goes on, now we minister to one another. We learn to be a minister rather than a consumer. We learn to see that God saved us from something, for something. We've learned to see our abilities as that which God would use in the church and individually. And you're moving people to a minister mindset. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 tells us that we've been reconciled to God through Christ, and we've been given the ministry of reconciliation. We are Christ's ambassadors. So what does it look like to become a minister? That's a part of the discipleship process. And then as you get more and more mature, you're not just a minister, now you're taking other people through the entire process. So the Disciple Makers Covenant is really about me recognizing that if I'm going to disciple someone, or if I'm going to be discipled by someone, what does that covenant relationship, what does that relational vehicle, what happens in that vehicle, what does that look like? And so if I'm going to take somebody through something, I want them to understand that I'm discipling them. A lot of people are like, well, I can't say I'm going to disciple somebody. That doesn't sound humble. No, you never stop learning as a disciple and as a disciple maker. It's like parenting. I learned more about myself in parenting than I ever learned about my kids. I mean, as I did that process, it taught me it's okay to say you're discipling someone. And it's okay if the person you're discipling knows they're being discipled. One of the things we say around here is that which is unintentional is unreproducible. I mean, think about it this way. You might have been in a small group for years with somebody, and maybe in your mind you're discipling them. But if I went up to that person and said, hey, are you being discipled by anybody? They said, no. I'm friends with some guys. Maybe I'm in an accountability group with some guys, but I'm not being discipled. If you were intentionally discipling them and they didn't know it, then how would they even reproduce what you thought you were doing? And would they ever think that they could do it with somebody else and understand what that means? An intentional leader understands the game, understands what they're doing, understands what the other person needs, and takes them through a process of maturity. So when we think about the Disciple Makers Covenant, we're saying, okay, if I'm going to disciple somebody, this is what that looks like. If I'm going to be discipled by somebody, this is the commitment I'm making. And so we talk about what's called God's part, my part, their part. There's 3 parts. I can't do God's part. I can't do your part. I need to know clearly what is your part and what is my part. I can only do my part. And so I can't do God's, I can't do yours. The problem for many disciple makers is they don't do the part that God gave them to do, or they try to do both God's part and the other person's part and their part. And so clearly defining what is my part, what is God's part, what is your part. I commit to do my part, but you have to commit to do your part. Setting it up that way so that as we're discipling and being discipled, there are clear boundaries and guidelines for many who have never been discipled in the first place. It gives us boundaries to know what we're supposed to be doing, why, and how. And the reason it's in this workbook is so that if you're leading a group, you can say, here's what we're going to try to do, and just be humble about it. If you've never discipled before, I'm going to probably do your part sometimes and push you too far and enable you, or I'm going to try to do God's part. That's wrong. I'm just learning. And if you're being discipled, it's really important, and I want to talk about this. I wrote a book called The Revolutionary Disciple, and one of the concepts of that is this. The death nail to discipleship is pride. Here's what I mean. If I'm told to go into the world and I refuse, right? If Jesus told me to go into the world and I refuse, then discipleship doesn't happen. Pride, because I don't want to go, I don't want to be uncomfortable, I refuse what Jesus told me to do, is the death nail of discipleship for me in my life, because I refuse to go. Pride kills discipleship. When you're proud and you won't follow Jesus, it kills discipleship. Pride kills discipleship if I, as a leader, decide I'm going to make a disciple, but I'm going to actually be proud and authoritarian and act like I've got all the answers. I'm going to focus on the wrong things. Jesus said to the Pharisees, the leaders of the Jewish nation at that time, the ones who should have been making disciples, he said, when you make disciples, you make more a son of hell than you yourself are. Because they were discipling with the wrong attitude and the wrong purpose. So pride, because these Pharisees, refused to be humble and serve, instead wanted the highest seat of honor. They wanted to be authoritarian, lord it over people. Because of the kinds of disciple makers they were, they made disciples, but they weren't disciples of Jesus, and they didn't have the characteristics of a Christ follower. If I refuse to be discipled because I don't make time, because I don't want to be told what to do, I don't want to learn to obey, I don't want to learn to submit to authority, pride kills discipleship in my life. So if I refuse to go follow Jesus, pride kills discipleship. If I refuse to be humble as a disciple maker and point people to Jesus and to emulate and be an example of Jesus-like characteristics, then the kinds of disciples I make are not godly disciples. So pride kills disciple making. And if I refuse to follow, I will not be told what to do. It's me and Jesus, and I won't be under authority to a disciple maker, and I will not be taught to obey all that Jesus commanded as God sent his disciples out to do, then I kill discipleship. What we're trying to say here is we want to be discipled. We want to be disciple makers. There's a covenant of relationship there. There are boundaries to that. And because so few have actually experienced positive intentional discipleship, we wanted to outline that from the beginning. So that's our purpose for this covenant. And the reason I want you to sign it is because, that just for whatever reason in our culture says a little bit more than, yeah, I'll do it. I've had a lot of people say, yeah, I'll do it. But as soon as I have them sign it, now they're like, wait a minute. Well, Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. In other words, do what you say. But in our culture, for whatever reason, having to sign it has more teeth to it. And I'm asking you to be committed. To be a disciple means you're committed to following Jesus. You're committed to being led by more mature disciple makers with the end goal of becoming mature, which, by the way, humility is required in maturity. We're becoming mature, and we're about the Lord's business as we disciple those in every sphere of our life. Our mission field is wherever we work, live, and play. And so this is the purpose of this, and I'll look forward to talking to you on podcast number 3. God bless you.